Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I am back. I'm back. It's Wednesday, and I am here ready for class. My husband and I and my family, we went on a little mini weekend vacation, so I wasn't able to be here on Monday, but we had such a good time. It was our first time getting out since COVID, and it was so much fun. We had a really good time. We were still being safe. We enjoyed ourselves. We just went to like a local boardwalk and near the coast in Texas and just had a blast. So anyway, I am back this morning ready for class. And this morning we are going to be talking about colorism. Colorism. I'm sure that that's a term that many of you have probably heard before, and maybe some of you have never heard the term colorism before and don't know what colorism is. So we're going to talk about colorism, why we should know what colorism is, and some things that we can do and things that we can not do to stay away from allowing colorism to be an issue in our relationships. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the term colorism, it's basically discrimination against people of the same culture. If you are dark skinned or lighter skinned, but you are in the same culture, and you may tend to discriminate against someone who's of darker skin or that's in your same culture, or you may discriminate against somebody who is of lighter skin within your same culture. So why is this even a thing, right? Like, who cares what color your skin is? A lot of you may be saying, or why does it impact people? Or, why is this something that we should be talking about? Well, as much as we like to think that our skin tones don't make a difference in how people treat us or talk to us or, look at us or have expectations of us, it does matter. And the reality is, for many people, good morning, True Fan. How are you? Good to see you this morning. Good afternoon for those of you who are catching me on the replay, or good night, good evening for those of you who may be elsewhere in the world. So I appreciate you all being here this morning. So a lot of people think that, just because it's not something that they've experienced, it doesn't exist. Well, I've never experienced any issues or discrimination against me being short because I'm not short, but that doesn't mean that that type of discrimination doesn't exist. So it's the same thing with colorism. Just because you may not have personally had any experiences with colorism, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And so we need to address it, because the things that we don't address, the things that we don't talk about, we're not aware of. And if we're not aware of things, then we can easily say things and do things that can offend someone or hurt someone. So that's why we are talking about colorism. Colorism sort of started back in the days of slavery, way back when. And what happened pretty much was slave masters, who were typically white, would tend to sleep with the slaves, outside of their marriages. And so therefore there became a huge culture of mixed race children. And these mixed race children were often lighter in color, just like what we see today. And therefore, because they were lighter in skin tone, they were considered more pleasing to look at, easier on the eyes maybe. And they would bring these children a lot of times into the house, or allow them to take care of the children. They would allow them to, serve food, cook, all these different things. So they got slightly better preferential treatment over the darker skinned slaves, who often worked out in the fields and continued to do the hard, more laborious work. Now, that does not negate that they were still slaves. They still never had any additional benefits. They never, just because they were now family, really technically family of the slave master, they still never received any benefits. They never got any land or property or different things such as that. It was just, they might have received a slightly better treatment, or maybe not had to work. I'm not gonna say they didn't have to work as hard. They did. They just maybe worked inside versus being outside, basically, was the difference. So, and this mentality sort of carried on throughout time. Depending on the climate or the culture that you are that you were raised in, or depending on the climate or culture that you're attempting to live in, you may be self-conscious about the shade of your skin or your skin tone. Colorism is not an issue that is isolated to just Americans. People all over the world, Asians, Indians, Native Americans, South Americans, they all deal with this issue of colorism. Even in the Caucasian community, I would add that some people will probably discriminate, like if they're extra white, if they have like no color in their skin versus some level of color, like, and you'll hear them say things like, oh, well, you tan easier, or, tan easier, or you don't need to tan it anymore, right? Different things such as that. So it's all something that exists in every race. It's just it tends to be more predominantly seen in cultures that have more melanin in their skin tones, where people can be treated. Because in Asia and in other countries, if you are darker in skin tone, that causes people to think that you work outside, that you work a laborious job, and therefore you may not make as much money. You don't have the privilege of being able to work indoors, where your skin might reflect that lighter complexion. And so it tends to be more of a economical identifier for people, whether you have more money or less money, whatever the situation is, and whether or not we want to, connect with you or be in relationship with you or marry with you, or different things such as that. So it exists in every color. So I've seen people, because of this factor, because people want to be seen as, less threatening, more accepting, people go out of their way sometimes to alter the color of their skin. We see skin bleaching products all the time. We see makeups of every tone, all sorts of things that people do to try to alter their skin tones. They want to feel more beautiful. They want to sometimes just gain the attention of the person who they are trying to gain. They want to feel more comfortable in their environment. If you have ever been anywhere where you are a minority and the majority of people around you are of a different skin tone, you can stick out like a sore thumb. Sometimes that doesn't bother you, and sometimes it does. It just depends on how people are treating you, how people are acting towards you. That can sometimes cause you to feel a different or a certain kind of way. Sometimes people are just trying to get more opportunities. They feel like people of lighter skin tones seem to get more opportunities. More doors are open for them. Maybe you want to be seen as an equal and not as less than. It is a common knowledge that research has shown time and time again that people of darker skin tones, people tend to think that they are less intelligent or less able-bodied to do things sometimes. Doesn't make any sense, obviously, but we know that is not all the case, but it is just the way society is sometimes. So whatever it is that you're trying to do, however you're trying to fit into your life circle and just be accepted by people, you can be conscious of what color your skin tone is. And that's what makes this topic controversial, because people don't want to be accepted or treated or talked to in any kind of way just because of the color of their skin, right? So if we don't talk about this, like I said, we can easily become unconscious of it and say things intentionally and unintentionally that can be very harmful to a relationship. So that's why I wanted to talk about this topic this morning. I first became conscious of colorism when I was a young child in my home. My brother and I have the same parents. My father is lighter complected. My mother is just brown skin, maybe a shade or two darker than me. But my brother was much darker in skin color. His tones were darker browns. And so it bothered him. He and I are 10 years apart, and it bothered him that he was the darkest shade in the family, and that when I was born, that I came out a much lighter skin tone. My parents never talked about it. My parents never made an issue about it. And the only reason that I ever knew that it was an issue is because my brother would make mention of it at times. And so, he would call me certain things and, sometimes treat me differently or just say things under. And so I grew to come to understand that, oh, this is an issue for him. Like, my skin tone matters. Otherwise, I would never even think twice, or it was nothing that was ever really talked about. My father, my paternal side of the family, both of my families really grew up where, slavery and all that my ancestors definitely both came from slavery. My great grandfather on my father's side and great grandmother, they worked on plantations, and it was very common, like I said, for them to sleep. And so my father's side of the family is very mixed race, and we have the whitest shades of white to the darkest shades of dark. So and they married, within the family, within that plantation. So both my grandparents on my father's side are very light in color. And on my mother's side, my grandfather was darker complected, worked out in the fields. They did a lot of sharecropping and, cotton picking and pea picking and rose budding, all these things. And so, they were slightly darker complected. My grandmother on my maternal side came from Indian culture in Africa. They were Madagascan Indians in Africa. So they look like very just dark-skinned Indians. So I say this because we had every shade of color in our families on both sides. So our family looked very multicultural, I guess you could say. So we have family members that were darker skinned, family members that are lighter skinned. Our grandparents and our family, color wasn't something that we grew up making a lot of mention about. It for our family, my grandparents, and from what I remember of them, your skin tone was not anything to be celebrated or to pay extreme attention to. What was extremely important in our family was that we got educated and that we were able to talk and express ourselves in a way that let people know that we were intelligent, that we could speak, that we could, make our way in the world to be successful. Because to them, what you look like may get you in the door, but it didn't matter if you couldn't keep yourself there. And in order to stay in a position or really be successful in anything, you needed to be intelligent. You need to be able to show that you were intelligent. And so that was stressed much more than what we looked like in our family. Like, how we look was never never a thing. People put on a little, the women in my family may put on a little lipstick. They may get made up, they may not. It just depended, if they were going to church on Sunday, right? So being saved and being educated were the main things that were preached in our family, not our skin tones at all. So that was just my personal experience within my family with colorism, how I became sort of aware of it. My personal experience with colorism have not been extreme, right? So I've never had anyone deliberately say or do anything. Well, yeah, I've had people say things or whatever, but nothing was ever said to me in a way that made me feel self-conscious about my skin tone. And I know people say, well, Ruth, you're lighter complected, and so maybe I wouldn't experience. And I agree with you. If my skin was extremely dark, if my skin was extremely light, I probably would have had more things said to me than what I did. But I did have, things said to me, just not in a way that was a predominant thing in my life that caused me to be any kind of way self-conscious about it. So, however, I would be less than honest if I did not say that my skin tone has allotted me some opportunities and, potentially opened some doors for me that I may not otherwise would have had. I can't say that for sure, but that because no one said, oh, your skin tone is this, so let's give you this opportunity. But you can tell when people look at you, how they receive you, how they look at you, what they think about you, whether or not they kind of like you or interested or whatever. And they give you opportunities, or want to befriend you, or different things such as that. And the only reason I would even know this is because I had, darker skin and lighter skinned people who I worked with and, went to school with, and different, and I would see the different ways that we would be treated and looked at or called upon for different things. So I can't say that, like I say, I would be less than honest if I didn't say that my skin tone did not award me or afford me some opportunities that I may not otherwise would have gotten so easily, things that my darker counterparts had to work a little harder for, and things that, my lighter skin counterparts may not even thought twice about. So I've been in numerous environments where my skin tone was made reference to. People will say, call you a red bone, or a yellow bone. I don't consider myself a yellow bone, but a lot of people, would say, just based on whatever, it's all subjective as to what people think you are, right? So there's no defining, there's not always a defining mark of, what is considered this, what is considered that. It's just a matter of how people perceive you as to what they call you. So, but definitely I've had words said to me that let people know that they were making reference to my skin tone. And this has happened to me all over the world. I mean, I've been, in at times where I'd been down in South America, people who didn't speak my language, if they would see me and we'd be the same color, they would, come put their arm up next to my arm and, make reference that, oh, we're the same color. So you think, okay, if that makes you feel better or makes you accept me more, then okay, it is what it is. So, colorism is definitely something that is a part of our world, and we would be remiss not to acknowledge it, not to pay attention to it, and not to talk about it. So how should we address this conversation so that it doesn't become an issue in our relationships? Because that's why we're here. That's why we're talking about this morning. If you feel like it is potentially an issue for someone that you live with or work with or go to school with, or your friends or people you barely even know, then it might be good to address it. If you're feeling like it's an issue, it might be good to address it. If not, don't worry about it. If you don't think it's an issue or whatever, then don't worry about that. Good morning, Levi. How are you this morning? Good to see you. Welcome in. We're talking about colorism this morning. So I'm going to talk about things from a different perspective. And if one of them fits you and you can find a takeaway from this conversation, then, please grab it and run with it. So when it comes to family members, when we're talking about colorism, I sort of mentioned, in my family, what our issues were. One of the reasons where it becomes a issue is because certain comments are made, right? People make comments about our skin tone, and it shows up early. It shows up very young in life, how people treat their children, how people talk to children, and how we make comments in reference to kids' skin tone. So a lot of times this is where colorism begins, is in the home, in the family. You'll hear a lot of people use those terms, yellow bone, red bone, or dark chocolate, or, different things that people will say. And that starts kids to start identifying themselves by their skin color, right? Which should not be, but this is where it starts because we make reference to it. Oh, this is a yellow bone. This is a red bone, or this is dark chocolate over here, right? And we start calling them and by those things instead of calling them by their names, or calling them whatever other things that we use to identify those children. And so how we say it and how we make reference to it helps them identify and sort of dictates whether or not they see themselves in a positive light or in a negative light, right? How if we call them dark chocolate and we make it seem like it's a good thing to be, and we reference it in a manner that is beautiful, that is appealing, then kids begin to see themselves in that light. The same thing goes for if they're browner in tone or lighter in skin tone. However we say it, however it comes across our lips, is how they take it in. So if we look at it from a negative perspective, like if you say yellow bone or light skin or that white girl over there, and you say it with sort of a negative connotation behind it, then they begin to feel self-conscious about their skin tone being the thing that identifies them and whether or not they see themselves in a positive or negative light based on how they look. So that's where it begins. So be conscious about referring to children by their skin tones and making reference to it on a regular basis so that they don't become self-conscious and feeling like they are worth more or less based on their skin tone, because children should not feel that they are less worthy, less beautiful, less smart, or less of anything based upon their skin tone, or more beautiful or more appealing or smarter just because based on their skin tone, because it just sets up a false precedence of what is true and what may not be true. So be careful. That's where it starts. In the areas of work and school is where we really tend to see colorism play out, right? Because this is where we tend to be among more people of different races, different cultures, different skin tones and complexions. So no matter how much education or experience one might have, I have witnessed time and time again that, darker complected skin tones are often assumed, let me say that clearly, assumed to be less intelligent than their lighter skin counterparts. They are often assumed to be more aggressive or more violent, and which makes people feel that for some reason they are more threatening for whatever reason. Now, though, this is typically they're not those things. 9 times out of 10, they're not those things. If a person is violent or aggressive, and 9 times out of 10, it's just because of maybe how they grew up or different things that they were exposed to, how they had to survive or make their way through life, different things such as that. It's not based. Your skin tone does not make you more aggressive or less aggressive. Maybe your environment does, but your skin tone does not. However, they often find themselves in the position of having to defend themselves, right? Having to prove their intelligence more than they should have to, having to speak in a manner that is, like more respectful or less threatening, so that they come across as being well-versed and non-confrontational sort of thing. So if they don't want to be perceived if as the Black man or the Black woman with an attitude, right? Because anytime if you're darker complected, you say something, people think, oh, you have an attitude, right? Versus if you're lighter in skin tones, people don't always think that you have an attitude. They just think maybe you're being passionate, very passionate about what it is that they're saying, right? So there's a difference, which is ridiculous, but that's often the way it comes across. So they have to be very strategic, in how they come across, and very careful when they're expressing their opinions that are different from others. So this is something that they tend to, from my conversations and, talking with family members and friends and people that I work with, these are things that they often find themselves in the position of having to do. While their lighter skin counterparts are assumed, and I say that again, are assumed to be slightly more intelligent, maybe softer on the eyes, more pleasing to look at, less threatening, and therefore they are more easily accepted. This is not right, people. We know this is not right. I'm just talking about this because we know that this is often the case. This is often what we have seen in the world. You may not agree, and that is perfectly fine, but it does not negate the fact that this mentality actually exists, okay? Now, I have friends and been friends and worked with, school with, church with every shade of brown from multiple cultures, right? I work with them, and I've worked with people out from all over the world. And what I found interesting is how colorism plays out when it comes to relationships, okay? Extremely darker skin. I mean, and there's a million things that I can talk about with colorism when it comes to relationships. And I'm going to talk about just some of the commonalities and some of the things that people have in common that you may not have known or may not have realized, because this was something that I really didn't even realize myself. Extremely darker skin tones and extremely light skin tones really tend to suffer the same discriminatory assumptions, right? When it comes to relationships. If darker skin tones don't want to come across as threatening, or if they don't want to, be seen as mean or unapproachable, they have to go out of their way to be extra nice, right? So that they can be, or friendly, or different things such as that, just to be accepted. Well, their extremely lighter skin counterparts have the very same issue. People tend to assume that people, and like I said, we're talking about people in the same culture. It is often common that people of lighter skin tones are assumed to be mean or stuck up or snobby or unapproachable. And so they have to work to be extra nice, to be accepted, to show themselves friendly, to show themselves as non-judgmental, so that people don't feel like they think that they're better than just because their skin tone is lighter than that person of the darker skin tone. So they're having the same issue on opposite ends of the spectrum, where they're both feeling like they have to be more of one kind of way or another kind of way in order to be accepted. And that was something that I didn't really realize until I started actually having some conversations with people in my circle of different skin tones, and asking them, what are some of the things that you've experienced based upon your skin color? And that was something that they both had in common, is that they both feel they are both assumed to be threatening for different reasons, right? In relationships, lighter skinned women had a hard time being accepted in the friend circle of darker skinned women, because they felt darker skinned women may have felt like they were a threat, that they could potentially take their man, or just different things such as that. So they had to work to be extra nice, or to be to come across as, I don't want your man. I just want to befriend you. I don't think of myself any kind of way different than you. I just want you to accept me as, being a friend. And the same on the opposite end with the dark skin, lighter skin people are so used to being discriminated against by extremely darker skin people until they don't know, they automatically assume that they're not going to be accepted by the darker skin race, and therefore tend to shy away from trying to be their friends. This is not the case in every friendship circle. I'm not saying that this is the case in every single friendship circle, but it is a commonality. It is something that exists. It is something that occurs. It may not be happening in your life and with your friends, but it does happen in other people's lives and in other people's friendship circles. And we need to be conscious of it. So we need not act like this does not exist. I'm by no means saying that these are blanketed statements that are true across the board on every level, but they are definitely very common, not very common issues that people have in their relationships, and things that they have to be conscious of that you may not be aware of. I know I was not necessarily aware of. I have friends of all shades. So, but this is something that they both actually have in common with both men and women. The other issue when it comes to relationships, like I said, with both men and women, is that we will see that based upon your skin tone, if you are comfortable with your skin tone, you will tend to look for someone or be attracted to someone who is of similar, maybe, skin tone. This is certainly not the only reason that people get into relationships with each other or marry each other, but it is common that if you are comfortable with your color, you may marry somebody, who is potentially the same color as you. If you are uncomfortable with your color and you are concerned about what your children will look like, you will often tend to marry somebody opposite of you so that your children can come out maybe how you want them to look, or in a way that you think that they will be more appealing or have an easier time in life. So we see people marrying and getting into relationships with each other for multiple reasons. It's not always love and getting along and all that stuff is obviously important, but also people do look at skin tones because it does matter to people the color that their children are, or how they want to be accepted. So sometimes you may see a light-skinned person, a very light-skinned person with someone who's much darker complected, or you may see, someone who's much darker complected pick someone who is very light in color, and maybe because they are concerned about their children not coming out looking the way that they look when they are uncomfortable with who they are or how they look. And this comes out of people's mouths. This is not something that I'm making up. I have literally heard people say, I don't want my kids to look like me. I want them to, be lighter or be darker complected or whatever. And so they will intentionally look for partners who are the opposite of them so that they can try to have hopes that their children will come out looking one way or another. So like I said, people go through extremes. Colorism is a reality. It is a real issue that people face. It is a real issue that people suffer from. And it is and can be an issue in our relationships. And it doesn't have to be. Talk to people. Stop making assumptions about whether or not a person is this way or that way. So I want to leave you all with some things that I want you to be aware of. If you are not aware of colorism or don't know how you may play into that and not know it. So work very hard not to use skin tones as an identifier of people, right? Stop calling people by their names or addressing people by their skin tones versus their names. Okay. If that's something that you tend to do, stop doing that. Okay. Stop addressing people by their colors and call them by their names or figure out something else to call them if you don't want to call them by their name, whatever. Stop making insults with skin tones, name calling, right? Stop insulting people or name calling people based upon their skin tones. Stop making statements with negative connotations behind it, right? Like, don't get too dark. Like when we're out in the sun or out at the beach, you'll often hear people say, you don't stay out there too long, you get too black, you'll get too dark, right? And so you need to get in some shade or put some sunblock on or this and that, right? We make reference to getting too much of one thing or another. And then we'll see the opposite. You need to go get you some color, right? You getting too light, you getting too bright. You need to go get out in the sun. You need to spend some time outside and go get you some color because it's not acceptable for you to be this light in color. Or, we will say things like, you'll hear people say things like, oh, you're pretty for a dark skinned woman, or you are handsome for a light skinned man, meaning with that underlining connotation of, being one way or another is not acceptable. But because you look nice, you are the exception, right? You're the exception to this. Stop doing things like that. Okay. Stop making statements that have negative connotations behind people's skin tones. Speak good of yourself and others always, no matter what skin tone they are. If you are worried or you have concern or you are in a place where you are not comfortable with the color of your skin, speak good of yourself, because how you speak to yourself, how you refer to yourself, how you treat yourself is how others will treat you as well. If they hear you say negative things about your skin, if they see you, if feeling a certain kind of way about your skin tone, then they're going to be self-conscious of it. and potentially make negative statements that make you feel even worse about yourself. Speak good to yourself. Speak good of your skin tone and who you are. I am beautifully and wonderfully made. There is nothing wrong with me. I am made perfectly in the image of God. We all are made in God's image, whether you are dark, whether you are light, or somewhere in the middle. We were all made in God's image. I don't know what God looks like. No one in the world knows what God looks like. We can assume what Jesus may have looked like because he lived on this earth. He was a Jewish man who walked this earth. He was outside a lot more times than not. So I would assume that, he was darker complected. But what God looks like, none of us knows. None of us knows. But we do know that we all look like him in some way, shape, or form. So there's no reason to be ashamed or feel any kind of way about how you look based on your skin tone or the way anyone else looks. We should not shame people. We should not elevate people or shame people based upon their skin tones. Okay, look deeper than the surface when you are talking with someone. Stop this workplace discrimination. If you are a business owner, if you are or have the ability to be in the hiring and firing position, make sure that the people that you want to serve, the people who you work with, the people who are in your workspace look similar to the people that you want to serve. You should not be serving people in your communities and not have anyone in the office or workspace that doesn't look like them. And I say this because even when I go to Asian hair stores now, right, I remember that there used to be a time where I would go into like an Asian hair store getting hair and all that. And there would be nothing but Asians working in there, right? Because we all know that a lot of Asian hair stores are owned by Asians. Nothing wrong with that. However, when I walk in there as a customer, I'm not going to go to that Asian and ask them about this hair and this texture of hair or this kind of hair, and because they can't really relate. They don't really know, right? But now when I go into Asian stores, I see Black women working in these Asian stores. And now I feel much more comfortable going up to that Black woman and saying, hey, I was interested in this, or I'm looking at this, or what do you think about this? Or how does this work with this? Blah, 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 right? And so they've gotten smart about making sure that their employees represent the people that they are serving, that they have employees that represent the people that they're serving. So be conscious of that. If you are serving a community that is, multicultural, have people in the workspace that represent those people so that they know that you are, they can feel more comfortable, know that you're coming from a place of that where you care and you have concern about, their needs or wants, and that you're taking the time and giving thought about what you are providing for them as a service or, as a product or whatever it is. So that's the last thing that I want to leave with you all. I hope that this was somewhat of an enlightening conversation for some of you, maybe another conversation that you've heard the same of. I'm not sure. But either way, I hope you were able to gain something from it and increase your awareness of and self-consciousness of colorism when you are communicating in your communication, how you talk to people, how you reference people, how you treat people, how you love on people, and that you're not discriminating against people based upon their skin tones. All right. So I'm going to say a prayer. We're going to head out of here, and I will have a tip coming out tomorrow, and we'll be back here on Friday talking about racism. Okay, totally different than the issue of colorism, but we'll be back here Friday talking about racism. All right, Father, thank you, Lord, for loving on us despite how we look. When you created us in the image of yourself. You made us darker shades and lighter shades. And we can only assume that something about our colors looks like you. We don't know, but we can assume that because you tell us that we were made in your image. So show us, if we love you and we say that we have all this love for you, then we need to love ourselves because we represent you. We are in the image of you. So Father, help us to treat each other, love on each other, and care for each other based upon our hearts, based upon our spirits, taking the time to get to know each other and not just based upon our skin tones. Help us to see beyond what we see on the surface and allow us to see people the way you see us. Love on us, help us to love on others. We thank you for taking care of us and being there for us. Help us to know that we can make change. We can't change everybody, Lord, but we can change ourselves. We can change the way we interact with others. And so give us the strength and the courage and the ability to be able to do that, and the will to be able to love people based upon who they are and not what they look like. We love you. We thank you. Bless every person in the chat. Anyone who is struggling right now with their identity based upon how they look, remind them that they are perfect, that you made no mistakes when you made them, and that who they are is just how you wanted them to be, and help them to get comfortable and be accepting of how they look and not be judgmental towards themselves or others. We love you. We thank you. These things I ask in your son, Jesus' name. Amen. All right, guys, I will see you all. You all have a wonderful day. Go in the world, be the light that shines in this world of darkness, and be the light in your area. All right, I love you all. Take care, and I will see you all back here live on Friday. All right, bye-bye.